Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this World Association for Public Opinion Research webinar concerned with writing a successful abstract for the 2025 WAPOR conference, some practical guidance. My name is Timothy Johnson. I'm the past president of WAPOR, and I'm very pleased to welcome you today to this presentation, which colleagues and I will be spending the next hour going through with you. And so we'll go ahead and get started. First off, a very brief introduction to WAPOR for those of you that are not familiar with our organization. We are one of the leading international professional associations dedicated to promoting the understanding and practice of public opinion research worldwide. In fact, I would say we are the leading international organization concerned with the conduct of public opinion research worldwide. We aim to foster global communication among researchers and also to support the development and dissemination of best practices. You'll find a lot of resources on our website supporting best practices. And we also are concerned with research ethics and maintaining the highest professional standards for the conduct of public opinion research. We were established in 1947 and have been holding annual conferences since that time. And since 2010, we've also organized a series of regional chapters around the world who hold separate research conference meetings on a periodic basis. Our membership is very diverse. We include individuals from academic institutions, research institutions, government agencies, not-for-profits and non-governmental organizations, as well as commercial polling firms. And we do have a global reach, over 900 members in over 112 countries. And so we truly represent the international community of public opinion researchers. And we include in our membership both seasoned professionals with decades of experience, as well as student members and individuals during all phases of their professional careers that we exchange ideas and learn from one another. We're also very inclusive and diverse in our membership, and we strive for balanced gender and regional representation in both our membership and in our leadership roles. As I mentioned, we hold an annual conference, which serves as our premier global event for public opinion and survey research. And these conferences are held all over the world. And I'll talk just about a few of them in a moment. But our upcoming conference in 2025 will be our 78th annual conference. It's scheduled for May the 12th through the 15th in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States. And it will be held in conjunction with the 80th annual meeting of the American Association for Public Opinion Research. We'll be holding our conferences side by side in the same facility, so attendees will have an opportunity, if they so choose, to participate in both of these premier events, which will be held at the St. Louis Union Station Hotel in downtown St. Louis. I was visiting that venue just the other day, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I think it'll be a very welcoming site for participants at our conference. Here's a few images that were taken at our 2022 conference held in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. This was our first in-person conference after the COVID pandemic, when we went online for a couple of years with our meetings. But this was a very notable conference. It actually, the theme of the conference was celebrating our 75th anniversary as a professional association and celebrating 75 years of worldwide public opinion research. It was very exciting. And one of the key announcements at the conference was the formation of a new regional chapter of WAPOR, the Sub-Saharan Africa chapter. And the image in the lower right corner of this slide, you can see the group that was at the announcement of the formation of our new chapter. Who attends our conferences? As I mentioned, academics participate, as well as applied practitioners who work for or own their own research firms around the world, consumers of public opinion polls, are also in attendance, as are media representatives and representatives from international organizations, as well as individuals employed by national statistical offices. They're all welcomed, and we all learn from one another. Here are a few more images from our 2023 conference, which was held in Salzburg, Austria. It was a gorgeous location. This conference was held in September, which was an ideal time of the year. It was hosted at a local university that was very welcoming, and it was just a wonderful experience that I still have very fond memories of attending. And just a few unique features of WAPOR conferences, that there's always an interdisciplinary focus, and the participants are very diverse in their backgrounds and research interests. Um, in addition to formal paper sessions held at the conference, we also employ uh, electronic equipment, audiovisual materials to facilitate more dynamic and engaging sessions, which also feature a very active participation from attendees, and very constructive feedback is always given to presenters who walk away feeling that their work is both valued, appreciated, and improved by the comments that they receive at the conference. And as I mentioned, the upcoming conference will overlap with the American Association for Public Opinion Research, but our conferences also overlap with research groups in Europe and other international associations from time to time. And of course, there are multiple networking opportunities. And when we do post-conference surveys, networking opportunities is always one of the most popular reasons that participants cite for attending our conferences, because of the opportunities to make contacts worldwide during the WAPOR meetings. And lastly, here are some photos from our most recent conference last summer in Seoul, South Korea. It was also an amazing conference, and the hosts there were very welcoming to us as well. And I think we set some records in terms of attendance there, and it was just a wonderful experience. But I'd like to turn over the presentation of my colleague, Chase Harrison, who is the chair of WAPOR's Education Committee, who will get down to some of the specifics in terms of the topic of today's webinar, which is preparing abstracts for submission to next year's conference. Chase, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. And I wonder if maybe joining me on this, Ksenia Kislova, who is our executive director, and Wolfgang Aschauer, who is the conference chair, might also help out talking a little bit about some of the logistics and what we take, and then we can go into some tips. So Tim, thank you so very much for the introduction, and we'd just like to sort of welcome Ksenia. Maybe you could give us an overview on the types of papers.
Thank you very much, Chase, certainly. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. We hope it will be useful for you, and of course hope to see all of you in St. Louis and our next conferences. There are three main types of submissions that are usually accepted at the WAPOR conference, and next year's conference won't be an exception. WAPOR equally welcomes all three types of submissions, but each of them has its own specifics, and I will talk a little bit about it. So the most common type of submission is an individual paper representation. It's rather a presentation more than a paper, because WAPOR does not demand you to submit full manuscript of your paper, like in some other events or like in a journal publication. So we call it an oral presentation. The presentation can be dedicated to both substantive topic, methodological topic, any other topic that you deem relevant. Such individual papers are usually grouped into panels of 4 to 5 papers, with the average panel duration of 90 minutes. Every presenter would have between 12 and 18 minutes for their presentation. So the advantages of this type of submission is that you are fully independent to decide on the topic, on the exact scope, on what exactly you would like, which part of your research you would like to prepare and present in this presentation. Some downsides would be that the other people who are participating in this panel alongside with you might be speaking of different topics. Of course, we always try to group the papers thematically to make sure that all our conference participants have an opportunity to receive meaningful feedback and to meet an engaged audience. But depending on the specifics of your topic, some papers in the past deal with the very narrow aspects. It is not always easy to match paper against other topics and have a coherent panel. In this respect, more beneficial is a pre-organized panel. So if you are working in a group or if you have a project with several colleagues collaborating, you can consider submitting a pre-organized panel. It requires a little bit more planning, a little bit more preparatory work. A pre-organized panel needs to have a panel description submitted and then 4 to 5 individual presentations submitted by each of the authors. Again, it's up to you to decide what would be the title, the topic of your pre-organized panel, and whom exactly you would like to invite to participate in the panel. Pre-organized panels are included into WAPOR program exactly as they are, as long as they have passed the review and have been accepted. So in this way, you can maintain the original thematic scope of all of your presenters. You can also invite a discussant to serve on your panel if you wish, but this is optional because generally WAPOR doesn't have a practice of discussants, so the vast majority of our panels are without discussants. And finally, the third type of submission is a poster presentation. Well, you all know what is a poster. For WAPOR conference, we usually have posters prepared in A0, A1 format. The poster can include graphics, can include textual material, any chart schemes, anything that you like. Posters need to be prepared in English and they are exhibited during all 4 days of the conference. Posters are presented in a one single networking style poster session where all conference participants are walking from one stand to another and have a possibility to talk to you. It's also a good opportunity to maybe, first of all, to present your research, but also maybe to meet colleagues who are working on the same topic as you are. WAPOR conference usually practices a rule of one paper presentation per person. It has to do with the number of submissions that we receive. Respectively, if you have more than one topic that you would like to present, you can consider submitting one individual paper and one poster. Now, a little bit about logistics and deadlines. At the moment, the call for papers is open and we accept submissions until the 20th of December. Depending on the number of submissions, we might be proposing some extensions, but if you have already a good idea of your topic, please don't wait until the last moment. Go ahead and submit. We expect the notifications of acceptance, or in some cases maybe rejection, to be sent out by WAPOR by the end of January, and around mid-February, the registration will be open. The conference will take place between May 12 and 15. The venue is the St. Louis Union Station Hotel in Missouri, United States. Information, registration fees, and accommodations options, also the travel logistic, will also be published on the WAPOR website in January. Since this conference is conducted together with WAPOR, in conjunction with WAPOR, you can also check the WAPOR website because maybe they will be sharing also some information and tips about interesting places to visit or hotels which are nearby the conference venue. And if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so once your paper have been submitted, they undergo a review process, and my colleagues will speak later today about what to pay attention to make sure that your paper is accepted, so how to prepare a good abstract. Generally, WAPOR abstracts submitted to the WAPOR conference, they are diverse. So not all abstracts, not all presentations follow classical academic structure, theoretical framework, methods, data, etc. In some cases, these are survey results presented. In other cases, we speak about maybe some specific fieldwork issues in the country. Due to this, the evaluation process, our paper reviewers, and I can mention that all paper applicants, you can volunteer as a reviewer and also the chair when submitting your abstract. They are invited to read the abstracts. There is a double-blind peer review, so neither the reviewers know the names of the authors, nor you will be informed of the name of the reviewer. they are asked to read the abstract and evaluate the overall quality. So if there is no specific theoretical framework that you are using in your research, please don't worry about it. There is no separate evaluation of theory, data, method separately. Every paper is reviewed, every abstract is reviewed by 3 reviewers, and based on this, there is an average evaluation, average assessment that is made, and respectively, the conference committee later decides at what threshold, above which threshold the papers are accepted or rejected. All submissions need to be made through the WAPOR conference portal. We already received several questions from colleagues whether you need to be a member of WAPOR to submit an abstract. No, you don't need to be a member of WAPOR, but you will need to have an account created through the WAPOR membership portal. It's free, you just need an email to have a login and a password. And once you're logged in, you go to the events tab, and there you can submit your abstract for the forthcoming conference. And next, please. Yes, which rules the authors, co-authors need to observe? First of all, the submission can include quite many co-authors. I think the limit set by our system is 10. If you have more, you can mention them in the body of the abstract, but this doesn't happen that often. Usually every paper, every presentation is presented by one author. If you have more colleagues attending, it is possible to make presentation by 2 co-authors, maybe in exceptional cases by 3 co-authors, but please note that there will be no time extension. The time is calculated for every presentation, regardless of how many people would like to present it. In case of multiple participants attending, every person would need to register to participate in the conference. And if you don't have a membership in WAPOR yet, you will need to acquire it together with your registration. So we have a separate registration fee for non-members, which also includes WAPOR membership in the year of the conference. Yes, every individual is limited to present one paper to maximize participation. If you have more topics to present, as I mentioned, you can submit posters, or we also have exceptions for participants of pre-organized panels. They can present in a pre-organized panel. So if you have been invited to present on specific topic and you agree, you can in addition submit your own paper on some other topic that will be also accepted. The abstracts that need to be submitted, they are of 500 words, not more than that. All submissions need to be in English. We won't be asking you for full papers of your research, but we will likely ask you to upload your presentations in PDF format a little bit before the conference to make sure that all attendees can have a look at it and come to your session prepared, maybe already having some questions that they would like to ask you. And next, please. Yes, as a conference participant, you can also nominate your research for a conference paper award. This requires a little bit more effort because it is already a full written conference paper that needs to be nominated for an award. There are 4 main awards for which you can nominate your paper. Each award has its specifics in terms of the purpose, specific topic. So there are student paper awards. There is an award for the best paper on democracy and public opinion, and so on. In addition, every award has its eligibility criteria. So there are Elizabeth Nelson Prize. It's presented for a paper written by 1 or more colleagues from a society in transition. Naomi Turner and Janet Harkness are student paper awards. And finally, the last one, the last award, Lexis de Tocqueville Award, it is given for the paper concerned with democracy. So the author can be coming from any country and be at any stage of their academic career. In order to nominate a paper for an award, the author needs to participate in the conference. So it's a conference paper award. You need to submit your abstract as a first step, and once accepted, as a next step, I believe until the end of March for the 25 conference, you will need also to upload a full paper of your research that will be reviewed by an award committee, and a decision about award will be communicated then by the end of April. And I believe this is the last slide of mine. Yes, and I'm happy to hand over to Chase again for more insights, suggestions, and tips how to make a submission successful. Thank you.
Ksenia, thank you so very much. So we're now just going to go over some tips for successful submissions. These are things, and one of the things I like to sometimes think about in teaching is there's a sort of hidden curriculum, right? There are the formal rules and things that we do, and there are the informal rules and the tips and the tricks and the things you get from mentoring, but not everybody gets them from mentoring. So we're going to try to go over here some ideas for the hidden curriculum of how to successfully submit a paper and participate in a conference. And so in the next slide, we will see the overall goals that you care about and the things that you want to think about. So first, the goal, you really want to clearly communicate what you plan to do, why it's relevant, how you will do it. Right. And so just reading as an abstract reader, one of the first things we just like to look at, and it helps to see if in that first paragraph, we clearly see what you plan to do, why it's relevant, and how you will do it. And then it's also important to be succinct and write clear sentences and as William Strunk would have said, but there's an old American grammarian would have always said, omit needless words, omit needless words, but really try to be succinct. And there's something in a world with a great deal of diversity of languages and cultures like WAPOR, which is such a wonderful thing. There are some languages where being very flowery or being very elegant is something that is prized. And in the lingo of kind of academic English speaking conference abstracts, it's hard sometimes for that language to translate into the types of criteria we think of. So if you really want to just be very careful to, especially early on, be succinct, take words out rather than putting them in if you think you have too many, and otherwise just clearly communicating things. On the next slide, we will talk about some of the key elements of your proposal. So first, you're going to talk about the purpose or the background, I'm sorry, the purpose or the objective, the context, the background, then the main findings or the anticipated findings and the conclusions or the implications. And this is just one way of writing a paper or an abstract. But I tend to think it's one that works very well, and it's a good guideline to follow through. Now, in the next slide, we'll take a look at the purpose. This is just the succinct description of the overall purpose or objective of your paper. And I always think of this as give the reviewer a roadmap of the rest of what you plan to talk about. But the reviewers should understand based on the first sentence or two what your paper is going to contribute to the conference. Now, in the next slide, we're going to take a look at the context and background. So it helps after you've told us what you're going to do, sort of explain how this fits into some broader picture or topic. So tell us what it is, why it's important, why we should care, how your proposal or the paper you are proposing will fit into this. And since there are different types of papers doing different types of things, there can be different ways of doing this. But if it's building on previous research, explain what that is. If it's related to some important or interesting topic, as many of our papers are, that's the great thing about being an organization, a conference of people who collect a lot of important data, then just explain to us what it is and why it's important. And if you're discussing a specific case, so if you're doing a study in one type of opinion in one place, give us some background to help us understand what it is and why it's similar or different from other cases. So in cross-national research, or in research where we maybe have just research in a single country or case or place, it's often helpful for us to try, as reviewers, to try to think, how would this case sort of work with others? What is it that really makes it interesting to be studying one type of topic in one sort of setting or place? And so if you can show us that, then that becomes something that we see. And just as something to keep in mind on that, the reviewers will all have very different backgrounds, and you may think something is obvious because in your field it may be obvious, but to Ksenia or Wolfgang or me or Tim or any of the other reviewers, maybe it isn't something that we're used to in our field. And so just tell us that. You should tell us the methodology that you're using if it's a methodologically oriented paper. But if you're creating data of some sort, tell us what you're doing. Is it an experiment? And if it's an experiment, then you want to describe the design and the groups. So tell us the experimental design if that's what you're doing. If you're coding or classifying things, explain how you're doing this. If you're using scales or you're creating some new set of attitude scales, tell us how you're creating them or what they're designed to do. And then if it's data collection, there are a lot of different standards on what you should report, but you should at a minimum discuss, is this a single country or a multiple country? Is it a cross-sectional study or repeated cross-sectional, lots of data that's sort of done at different time points? Is it a longitudinal study, a recontact study? But let us know something about that. And we can go on the next slide, continuing with the data. Describe the data so that we can evaluate it. And if it's a pre-existing data source, as many papers are, World Value Survey, ISSP, any other sort of survey, explain to us that. If it's original data, and this is really, there are different standards for this, but at a minimum, you want to think about the target population. Who did you try to study? The dates or time frames, if that's relevant, when you collected the data, how you collected the data, was it face-to-face, telephone, web, and say something about the sampling approach. And I think in particular in this world of many diverse sampling approaches, it really helps if we can see with something a probability sample or not a probability sample. And I can, as a reviewer, I am open to both probability samples and non-probability samples, and I don't necessarily penalize one over the other, but I get very skeptical and suspicious if you say we drew a sample of, and you're not telling me how you sampled or where those respondents came from. So just explain to us something rough. We drew a sample of this population using this type of approach. And then, of course, you should describe the relevant constructs or questions you're studying, the measures, the scales, et cetera. And if you're using a model, so if you're doing something that's more analytically or more model-based, then tell us, please, the variables in the model as relevant. And if we continue on the analysis, just explain the methods you'll use in your paper. And I'm giving some of these as lightly or as edited examples, but from things that were strong sort of descriptions of analysis to give you some ideas that we've pulled from some past conference papers. We will replicate Dahl's model and test its relevance in a non-democratic context, right? So I'm clearly seeing what you're doing there. We will create a scale to measure such and such and describe differences. We'll compare response rates, incompletes, and unweighted achieved samples across demographic benchmarks, right? We'll analyze the missing data in terms of break-off and item non-response across the experimental conditions. We'll then look at the linguistic and content characteristics of the answers, such as numbers of words and topics. Finally, we compare respondent survey evaluations in terms of interest, difficulty, satisfaction, and sensitivity. We first conduct a descriptive analysis of the evolution of these measures over time. We then continue with multi-level predictive analyses that take into account changes over time and national and regional differences that may influence relationships and individual perceptions of democracy. And so a couple of things just to think about here. We have a lot of different types of studies doing a lot of different types of things here. These all have different specificity. I think with the exception of a multi-level model, we don't have a lot of descriptions of, of the specific sort of narrow type of linear model or the subspecies of regression or whatever that you're doing, but we have a good, broad conceptual understanding of what you are doing in your paper or what you plan to do. Compare, look at variables, look at differences with variables, look at changes over time, do a model that looks at A, B, C, and D, those types of things. And so if we continue on to the findings and implications, so you briefly want to explain, if this isn't evident, what you expect to find or what you found. You then want to discuss the implications of your finding. And this is just, is it for public policy? Is it for public opinion theory? Is it for methodology? A lot of different possibilities. And if we can move on to the next, and just little miscellaneous things. So citations, these are not formal submitted academic papers, but if there's citations, you should include them if it's relevant. And especially if it's a citation we would all know, it helps to see that you're following a literature or a tradition or that somebody else has done something. And sometimes as we're looking at space, it's hard to put a full bibliography in every possible citation, so we don't expect that, but you can omit them, the full citations, or you can include them if relevant. And then just something, it always helps to think before you hit that submit button, check the grammar, spelling, formatting, and one thing I like to point out is we're often reading these on computer screens. And we're often, a jumble of text is sometimes harder to read than something that uses clear paragraphs and a little bit of space. It's that idea that if you're giving me a guideline of what you're going to do, if there is separate paragraphs and separate space between them, it lets me move more clearly sort of from the beginning to the end and back to the beginning again as I'm reviewing or analyzing something. So that, I think, is a real tip, even if a paragraph might not be required grammatically or formally. It can sometimes help in the context of reviewers who are often reading things on computer screens and trying to make a short, quick, but good evaluation of things. Okay, so here are some advanced tips. So that's all what I think of as the basic idea. Now, I think Wolfgang and maybe the four of us will talk a little bit. So I think of that as the basic tips. That would be the how to write a proposal. Let's now talk a little bit about how to strategize and think about a proposal. And so maybe we can talk a little bit, once you hit that submission button, Ksenia, what happens?
Well, once the abstract is submitted, we receive it successfully in most cases. After this, once the call for papers after the deadline on the 20th of December, unless we will announce an extension, which will be known later. After this, the review process begins. So all abstracts are divided randomly between reviewers. There will be a 3 reviewer for every abstract. They will review, there is a system to review the abstracts through our conference portal. And based on the results of the review in January, so by the end of January, you should be hearing back from us concerning the acceptance of your abstract. Immediately after the submission, you should receive a confirmation that your abstract has been received successfully with the ID number. So if you have any questions, If the system doesn't work for you, if you have an abstract of I don't know, any details that did not fit or anything else, you can always follow up by email with the WAPOR Secretariat, and in most cases, we're able to resolve those problems.
And one of the things that took me a while when I was first starting out doing this to learn was sort of after, so abstracts are submitted and reviewers rate them on quality and fit and so forth. And then there's a group of us, Wolfgang, Tim, me, Ksenia, others. Wolfgang, do you want to talk a little bit about, once we have all these, how we kind of fit them in the program?
Yes, of course, Chase. Thank you. Yeah. I hope you can hear me, everybody. Yeah. I think it's also now my turn, yeah, to talk a little bit more about strategic decisions when writing abstracts, bringing the abstracts in line with the conference theme. So we are 8 members normally of the conference committee. I can act as the chair now, which is fascinating for me because I'm also able to contribute to the organization of our great conferences. And my role is now to reveal also some secrets about which aspects are important in abstract so that they fit to the conference theme. As Xenia already mentioned, we all from the conference committee act as reviewers, but we have also more reviewers, about 20 to 30 reviewers, to check and rate all submissions. And I think that 3 things are mainly important. Yeah. Chase already referred to the quality of abstracts. That's maybe the most important point. But another aspect is also that presentations should fit with the conference theme. And as always, our conference themes are rather broad. So we accept methodological papers, submissions which are also not directly related to the conference theme. And as Xenia mentioned at the beginning, if you are involved in a great community of researchers, you can also try to form a kind of successful panel of related papers. So we are always also very happy to have these pre-organized panels, because then it's also an opportunity for you to attract a broader audience, because normally there are less parallel sessions when it comes to these pre-organized panels. Now, maybe next slide, yeah, to talk a little bit more about the conference theme of the next year. As you can see here, the conference theme is the evolving landscape of election polls, challenges, biases, and innovations in a polarized world. And I think that the topic is really very timely and important, yeah, especially when we think of the last US elections. As we all know, the pre-election polls estimated a kind of head-to-head race between Trump and Harris. In the end, Trump's victory was much clearer than many had expected. And then we can, of course, now ask ourselves why polls only partly function in the current societal climate. There are, of course, arguments that the results were mostly within the margins of error, but it's still, I think, quite striking that most polls failed to anticipate this quite clear victory. When it comes to WAPOR, that's also important. We are mostly interested in a comparative perspective. In 2024, nearly half of the world's population is voting in national elections in an era of global tensions, and that was also the reason why we wanted to address this topic for the next conference. When it comes to the you should maybe some tips, because that's most important. You should try to read the text and also our general text for the conference topic carefully, and you should also look for ways to frame the papers. And of course, you can also use the language of the text to suggest some connections to the general topic, especially when it's relevant. At the next slide, I tried to give some examples for that. For instance, the first example here, it refers to methodological issues. We talk in the conference topic paper about the bandwagon effect. That means that voters might support a perceived winning candidate in advance. On the other hand, we have the boomerang effect, where low polling numbers lead to a negative evaluation of the party. And you can, of course, also discuss issues related to the total survey error, for instance, sample demographics, non-response, mode effects, social desirability. That's quite important. When it comes to the second example, we can also see here that besides classical polls and surveys, we have emerging methods, for instance, monitoring social media discourses, online platforms, where we can also draw important and impressive conclusions, but it always remains open if these analysis represents then the whole population, a broader part of the population, or just a specific population. And of course, online platforms are also susceptible to false data from bots, trolls, and so ever. Especially concerning WAPOR, it's also of utmost importance to look beyond the US and Europe and the Western world in specific papers. So we really need abstracts and studies on polls in other political regimes, maybe also addressing things like misreporting, which might be especially prevalent when surveys are conducted immediately before elections. All those points are also quite important. This brings us to the concrete list of topics on the next slide. And here it's quite important that we always try to be very broad. Of course, we have this specific conference topic. And if you have done any research on that issues, your abstracts will be most welcome. But you will see at the other lists that we have different opportunities for all of you and all of your specific areas. So coming to our core topics in the foreground of the conference, maybe to go one slide back here, just to name a few. I think I have mentioned already some of these topics. The complexity of polling in high, middle, and low income countries, I think, is a very good summary of all those core topics we are interested in. When we look at the second topic list, it's also possible to address these issues from a broader societal perspective. You can also submit abstracts, for instance, on the freedom to conduct or publish public opinion research, public opinion and conflict resolution, political behavior, participation and culture in survey research. And then, of course, we are really interested in studies on political polarization, the current risks of democracy, right-wing populism, authoritarian attitudes, value changes. And if you have also done research on geopolitical tensions, the rise of defense and security, you're also invited to submit abstracts as well. Coming to the third list of topics, we also have to say that we have quite a lot of research at our WAPOR conferences on basic methodological principles of public opinion research. So you're also very welcome to submit abstracts on methodological challenges. For instance, survey design, survey response, non-response, and so on. You can submit abstracts on panel studies, longitudinal surveys. We quite often have pre-organized panels on comparative research, international and global survey projects, for instance, from the ISSP or the World Value Association group. Cross-cultural concerns are, of course, very important. Data archiving, and you see there is really a very broad list, and I'm quite sure that it's rather easy for all of you to choose your focus. Of course, the more your topic is related to the conference theme, the better, but we are all fully free to organize also specific methodological sessions, sociological sessions, political science sessions, and we fully appreciate and welcome all sorts of papers also from different world regions. This brings me to the last point of my part of the presentation, the pre-organized panels and the posters. I think it would be great also in St. Louis to form regional papers from different regions to get deeper insights. We had quite a lot of these sessions at the conference in Dubai, in Salzburg, and also in Seoul. And it can be assumed that WAPOR is, of course, very US based. So the chance of our conference is to view polling worldwide developments from different angles. And if you do not succeed to include 5 or 6 papers in advance, we as the conference committee and as the scientific program organizers can also still suggest or add some papers. And please keep in mind that every author has to submit their own abstracts, even when you are trying to build a pre-organized panel. You have to mention this in the description of the pre-organized panel that we can finally give the abstracts and include the relevant abstracts to that panel. A last opportunity, as Ksenia also mentioned, is to submit a poster. In Seoul, we also introduced the poster award, which went quite well, and I think we will continue also with this initiative. And we also had a specific time slot for the poster session, so you should really try to motivate maybe also your PhD or even master students to submit posters for our conference, or apply for a poster presentation yourself, because I think that there is really a higher chance compared to other conferences that posters are recognized, highly valued, and more intensively discussed. That's more or less my part of this presentation. Thank you once again for your attention, and I think I will finally hand over to Chase, and then we will quite shortly move to the Q&A session of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfgang. So I'm just going to give a few tips. One of the things, of course, that is wonderful about WAPOR is we have such a diversity of people. So we have the student, career academic researchers, commercial researchers. I always like to sort of tell my academic friends, but my friends in general, it's a great WAPOR. And also WAPOR, frankly, are great places for complementarity of interests, where you often have academics who have lots of time to think about something and really dig in depth on something, but don't have a lot of resources for data collection. And we have commercial researchers who often do data collection just as a matter of, it's what they do for a living very regularly, but they don't always have the time to dig in and analyze something and think deeply about any one thing that they study. And if we can, sort of get people talking to each other, it's often a win-win. So I'll go through a few tips, keeping that in mind. So for the academic researchers, I just want to point out, unlike many conferences, we do not require a full paper for presentation. And I will often talk with students. I'll say you should submit that to WAPOR, and people will say, but I haven't collected the data yet. I'll say, but you have a plan to collect the data. You're going to collect the data. You have a good analysis plan in place. Why not tell us what you're going to do? And slides are fine. Slides, that's a nice thing about this. Compared to some conferences which are very adversarial, very high stakes, I think WAPOR is much more friendly and less adversarial in general, maybe an exception now and then, but a discussant doesn't come in trying to pick holes in a paper. And there are other conferences where that is the role of the discussant, and that's not WAPOR. So you should know that you're going into a more friendly place, and generally we all like to hear what other people have to say and ideas, and the goal is not to produce the most finely crafted academic argument on the planet. There's great conferences for that. I'll be happy to suggest many if you'd like a less friendly set of discussants. It's also a great venue for finding international collaborators and so forth. So for the students, again, this doesn't need to be written, just an abstract. But of course, if you have a full paper, you can win prizes and the honor of the prize as well as the financial award. And if you're new and just tipping your toes, submitting posters is a great way to begin presenting. And now if we move on to the commercial researchers, it's great, a mixture of academic and commercial. Just keep in mind, we want things to be of broad interest. And so a case study is maybe of a little less interest unless the lessons learned are really strong and clear, or unless you can really convince us that it's telling us something we couldn't learn some other place. But think about being of broad interest. Commercial researchers is just very careful. We are data collectors. We're people who know something about data collection. Be specific about the data collection details. We did a study of people in 40 countries. Is a little too general for us. Sometimes that works for some types of clients. It doesn't really, we want more details. Avoid making it look like a sales pitch. It's fine if it's you're a commercial researcher, but please, we have booths and places where you can sponsor the parts of the conference and explain your products to us. But the presentation should really be focused more on something that we can all learn from and of broad interest. And then again, just the case studies. Less interest unless there's really a clear justification. And with that, we're going to first, please submit. And once you do, we'll have a webinar on how to give an effective presentation coming this spring. And we'll cover best practices for data visualization and presenting and those types of things. And then right before the conference, we'll be coming up with pre-conference tips to help you make the most of your experience. And with that, I think we would love to take some questions.
So while everyone is thinking of questions, perhaps I could show the submission system very quickly. I don't know how many colleagues had already the chance to visit our new membership portal. This is the WAPOR website. So most information about the conference you can find under events, our annual conference section. At the moment here, we have our schedule. So you have already general information about on which day what will be happening. There is a subsection with the submission deadline, information about available paper awards, and also information about our new cooperation with the European Survey Research Association, which might be of interest for students. So if you're an ESRA student member of ESRA, you are eligible for this Student Support Award for WAPOR. Now, in the top right corner, there is a member login for your membership portal. This is how the new portal looks at the moment. So once you log in, you would see this picture. You have a possibility to recover your password, or if you don't have an account yet, you can create it. And here under events, you choose the WAPOR annual conference. And this is how you proceed to the abstract submission. So at the very first, you need to choose what you're actually submitting. If you're submitting a paper poster, you go right away. If you're submitting a paper as a part of the panel, you would need to learn this panel ID from the panel convener. So the colleague who submitted the panel as a whole, he or she needs to communicate the panel ID to everyone. So you choose your type of submission. Here are the submission guidelines to remind you of some rules. You'll be asked whether you would like to be a chair or not, whether you would like to be a reviewer or not. You'll be asked how many paper authors are there on your paper, up to 10. You need to prepare this information. So if you have co-authors, please ask them for their organization, country, email, because all this needs to be recorded in the program carefully. We need to acknowledge every co-author, make sure the institution is recorded correctly. So you would need to enter this information for all your co-authors. And then there's a very simple last part for the paper title, keywords, and then your abstract. The word limit is 500 words. And here is another reminder on the recommendations that have already been excellently presented by Chase. And the last step required is to hit the submit button. So it's a very simple, straightforward system. And once you submit anything, you will see your papers here on top. So you can edit them, or you can also remove your paper, resubmit something new, or resubmit it again with some corrections if you would like to. Editing will be possible likely also after the acceptance. So if there are any small changes that you would like to make, this can also be done in January or February. So I stop sharing now. We can go to Q&A.
So Colin, I see, has a question. Congratulations, that was a great outline for a successful research proposal. Would you like to share an example or two of abstracts that do all of this in 500 words? And then the comment, WAPOR only allowed me 300 words. So Colin, that means you should submit to WAPOR because we're going to give you more words to say something. But probably we have to make some choices about what stuff we think is most important for our own paper. Yeah, I think that is exactly right. Ksenia and Wolfgang, I think we do have some abstracts that were floating around. Perhaps we can find a way to share those that do this. But it is a challenge sometimes to just be very, you have to take things out, or you can't fully describe everything that you're going to do, and trust that reviewers will, if you give the reviewer a guidepost, we all understand that people are dealing with the frustrations of limited words, but that economy helps us more efficiently and effectively review things. I do also find myself frustrated, but sometimes at these little tricks of you hyphenated words maybe count as one. You can full citations. Sometimes I find myself putting in a lot of citations and taking some out to meet my 500 word limit, or those types of things. So that can just be a little art of doing something. I had 7 points there. And so, even in the WAPOR world, if you do 40 words talking about each of the 7 points, you still have a few words left over to stay under that 300 word limit. So it's possible.
It's also a question from Samuel Wakuma. Sorry, did you say there might be an extension for submissions?
Well, in the previous years, WAPOR would announce an extension by 1 week or so. It depends on the number of submissions, on the timeline, on other circumstances. So at this moment, the deadline for submissions is the 20th of December, so it's exactly 1 month from now. It is possible there will be an extension, but at this moment we don't know about it yet. But it would be better not to wait until that and to go ahead with the submitting abstract right now. In addition to what Chase just mentioned, I think it would be important to differentiate between retelling the actual content of your research finding versus describing what the paper or what the presentation will be about. So don't try to put everything there. If your study is still ongoing, if you don't have the main results yet, that's fine. Describe the main research questions, the methodology, the data that we'll be using. Mostly from the past experience, we have low reviewer scores for abstracts that lack this information. This is not because of the specific topic or not because the sample size was too small, but because the abstracts were very uninformative. It's not clear what the research is about or what methodology is being used. So as long as all these details are mentioned, clearly described, but you don't have the main result yet, that's fine. So you don't need to wait for that extension because your data collection ends on the 5th of January, for example.
There is also a question from Nat Stone. Nat says, I'm a professor of research. I'd like to submit a general proposal for a poster session from analyses conducted by individual students. We would submit the best 1 or 2. Would WAPOR consider this? I think the answer is yes. Particularly with poster sessions, Nat, we're
Yeah.
very open-minded about formats and types of poster presentations.
I'm just thinking out loud here, but if you were to submit a placeholder poster submission and explain what you were going to do, we could probably fill in later some of the names of the specific posters. So I actually think that's a great idea. So I'm sure we can figure something out.
So we seem to have addressed, I believe, all of the questions. Does anybody else have any topics or specific questions that they would like us to address? A question regarding our upcoming 2025 conference. It will be conducted in person. That is correct. It'll be at the St. Louis Union Station Hotel in downtown St. Louis. They have an extensive exhibit space and plenty of meeting rooms that we'll use for individual sessions. Well, colleagues, I do not see any additional questions, but if anybody thinks of any after we conclude this webinar, please reach out to any one of us or to WAPOR's offices where Ksenia would see your inquiries, and we'll be happy to address any questions that you might have regarding preparation and or submission of abstracts for our upcoming conference, which we're really excited about. So with that, on behalf of colleagues, I'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar. And yes, we do plan to make this recording available on our webpage soon. All right, I guess with that, we are signing off. Ksenia, you can sign us off, please.
Sure. Thank you all for attending.